Imagine two separate pools of insured real estate: 10,000 homes located in Los Angeles and 10,000 homes located in Philadelphia. Historical data dictates that the chance of a fire in each city is exactly 1%. Statistically, 100 homes should burn annually in each market. If the chance of loss is identical, common sense suggests these two markets carry the exact same level of risk. Look at this split-screen visualization. Both cities show 10,000 units with 100 expected losses highlighted. But when we plot actual year-over-year outcomes for Los Angeles, the numbers fluctuate tightly, creating a very predictable, tall bell curve. Now watch the Philadelphia timeline. The actual losses here swing violently year over year, ranging anywhere from 75 to 125 fires. The resulting curve is wide, flat, and highly volatile. Probability measures the chance an event will occur, but probability does not equal risk. True objective risk is the mathematical variance of actual loss from expected loss. Because its actual losses deviate further from the mean, Philadelphia is objectively riskier, despite carrying the exact same 1% probability. Most people conflate risk with uncertainty. In casual terms, uncertainty describes a situation where outcomes cannot be estimated with any accuracy. If a meteorite destroys a warehouse, you experience a loss. Because meteor strike odds are unquantifiable, you cannot statistically prepare for it. The historical actuarial definition of risk requires known or highly estimatable probabilities. It relies on the law of large numbers, the principle that as the number of exposure units increases, the actual loss experience closely approaches the expected loss experience. This introduces the concept of loss exposure, any specific circumstance where a loss is possible, totally regardless of whether a loss actually materializes. To manage threats of an enterprise scale, institutions must abandon intuitive guessing. They leave unquantifiable uncertainty behind and build a precise mathematical taxonomy of their specific loss exposures. The first step in building that taxonomy is stripping away human psychology. Subjective risk is driven entirely by a person's mental condition or state of mind. It is how an individual perceives a threat. This mental state dictates behavior. High subjective uncertainty often results in highly conservative, prudent action. Conversely, a low perception of subjective risk breeds recklessness. Subjective probability relies heavily on flawed inductive reasoning. Think of a person who overestimates their fractional odds of winning the lottery simply because they bought a ticket on their birthday. The personal estimate does not match reality. Objective probability operates differently. It relies on deductive reasoning and the long-run relative frequency of an event, assuming an infinite number of observations with no change in the underlying conditions. Successful enterprise risk management requires isolating and removing subjective human perception entirely, relying purely on the objective statistical deviations of data. We can break down the mechanics of a loss event by building a sequential chain. A pre-existing condition leads to a specific event, which ultimately yields an outcome. In actuarial terms, a hazard leads to a peril, which results in a loss. A peril is the active, direct cause of the loss. If a building burns to the ground, the fire is the peril. A hazard is the underlying condition that amplifies either the frequency or the severity of that peril. These fall into distinct categories. Physical hazards are environmental conditions, like defective wiring in a wall or a sheet of ice on a crowded highway, that mechanically increase the frequency of an accident. Moral hazards involve character defects or acts of dishonesty, faking an injury to collect benefits, or intentionally burning unsold merchandise directly inflates loss severity through fraud.
There are also attitudinal hazards, which describe pure carelessness, like leaving keys in an unlocked car. Finally, legal hazards stem from the regulatory environment itself, such as jurisdictions known for massive liability verdicts. A corporate loss is rarely a random strike of fate. It is almost always the inevitable collision of an active peril with an untreated hazard. When we scale these definitions up, we reach enterprise risk. This is a comprehensive framework that categorizes every single major threat a business firm faces across a matrix. The matrix divides exposures into pure risk, situations like premature death, where there is only a possibility of loss or no loss, and speculative risk, situations like real estate investing, where a profit is equally possible. Threats are then categorized by scale. A diversifiable risk affects only individuals or small groups. A non-diversifiable or fundamental risk, like rapid inflation or armed conflict, impacts entire economies simultaneously. The ultimate failure state of modern risk management is systemic risk. This occurs when the collapse of a single entity or a small group of interconnected entities triggers the total breakdown of an entire financial system. The 2008 to 2009 financial meltdown is a prime example. The failure of localized financial institutions quickly metastasized, proving that deeply interconnected markets cannot isolate severe shocks. The downstream consequences were immediate. The national unemployment rate soared and the housing market collapsed as the damage traveled from institutional trading floors directly to residential neighborhoods. Failing to accurately categorize the scale of a hazard can turn a localized, otherwise diversifiable loss into an unstoppable systemic catastrophe. Untreated risk inflicts immediate damage on an economy. Without mechanisms to absorb variance, individuals and corporations are forced to hoard massive, unproductive emergency funds just to cover potential unexpected losses, freezing capital that could be invested. The secondary burden is even more damaging. Society is entirely deprived of certain vital goods and services because corporations abandon production, fearing the catastrophic severity of liability lawsuits. Historically, hundreds of companies manufactured childhood vaccines. Today, due largely to the threat of legal hazards and massive liability claims, only a small fraction of pharmaceutical firms continue to produce them. Effective risk management is an essential mechanism for economic stability. It provides the financial architecture that allows society to progress, innovate, and produce without paralyzing fear. This chart shows the enterprise risk treatment matrix. Every threat a firm identified must be routed into one of two strategic buckets: risk control or risk financing. Risk control techniques are designed purely to alter the probability or severity of an event. This includes total avoidance of a market or the separation and duplication of assets to prevent a single event from wiping out inventory. Loss prevention is a primary control technique. Public health campaigns targeting smoking or diet are direct attempts to reduce the frequency of medical losses before they ever occur. Strict loss prevention efforts reduce frequency, but they will inevitably fail to stop every incident. Those residual losses must be caught by the second bucket, risk financing. Risk financing provides the methods for funding the fallout. A firm can either retain the risk through self-insurance reserves or transfer the financial burden to another party via contracts, market hedging, and standard commercial insurance. True enterprise risk management does not attempt the impossible task of eliminating uncertainty. It is the rigorous, mathematical process of classifying variance and engineering the exact structural treatment to absorb it.